But before we do, I just wanted to talk to you about something which is a shared battle of ours. I think we are both at the moment somewhat involved in a battle to fight sensationalism, or in other words, to fight the thumbnails with the big red arrows down and everything is collapsing. What's your take on this? Because I know you have talked about this on Twitter and on other platforms before.
Yeah.
What are we seeing?
So it's kind of the tricky part of YouTube, right? The reason why people put that stuff in their thumbnails because it does well. The algorithm rewards that kind of sensationalist stuff because it's the same thing with, everyone knows about clickbait in general when it comes to articles. An article with a very captivating or a title that elicits some sort of strong emotion is more likely to lead to a click or someone to read it than something that gives a very plain and leveled analysis of that thing. And unfortunately, with the past few years, with GameStop and the pandemic, which kind of made a lot of people focus more on investing than they might have before, which there are great aspects to that, but also drew a lot of attention to those types of, headlines that maybe in the past people wouldn't necessarily be as interested about a story about, why the stock market's going to crash in 2 months or whatever the title might be. My own view is I understand why it happens because of what I said. If you're a YouTuber, I get that you're going to try and, do well for your channel and do the tricks that it takes to get there, whether that be clickbaity titles or clickbaity thumbnails. What sits wrong with me is because, I'm investment focused. I know that when it comes to investing, emotional responses is kind of your core enemy. It's actually one of the main detriments that people face when investing is their shortcomings from an emotional standpoint. There's so much academic literature that shows just how terrible we are at investing and how a lot of that, not all of it, some of it is more cognitive, but a lot of that is tied to emotional responses. So it's funny because that same approach to marketing videos is sort of the core evil, I guess, of people's personal investing and why they don't necessarily do well. So to me, I personally wouldn't want to push titles about how the market's going to collapse because I know that might make people make poor investment decisions.
Yeah. So
that's kind of my view from it. Yeah, sell or sell at the bottom, right? That's kind of the what it could elicit, if you will. But that's kind of my main thing.
You are a YouTuber. You're a successful YouTuber. Do you do a little bit of clickbait from time to time?
You know what? I genuinely try to avoid it. It depends how you define clickbait, I guess. I've done more like, I do focus on marketing. There are times where I think, there's probably an arrow in a couple of my thumbnails. Usually what I try to do though is I base that on what I'm actually discussing. So if I'm talking about GameStop, for example, I'll show the price chart for GameStop or the GDP chart for a country that's seen a decline, as opposed to just, I avoid flames. That's my big one. So, and that's the thing is I try not to be too, you don't want to get on your high horse and talk about how everyone is doing this evil thing or whatever, calling it evil. There are ways to make an attractive thumbnail and an interesting thumbnail. You just don't want to misrepresent the situation and especially go to that extreme where you're sensationalizing something as being the end of the market or, the demise of something that could elicit that knee-jerk reaction of selling everything or whatever have you.
Yeah. But I think maybe I actually do a little bit more of it than you do. So, for example, in the last video that I posted, which was rather successful, I did use flames, but in an ironic way. But still, I also said no, China's economy is not going to collapse. Which is, I think, if I remember sort of my days as an academic, the paper title would have been different. It would have been, I think it's rather unlikely this scenario that's being sketched by these YouTubers that says China will totally collapse, right? If you catch my drift.
I think what matters is qualifying your message, right? It depends on what your assertion is and whether the term clickbait usually means that you're misleading someone. So, if you were to post a thumbnail that said, I can't believe so-and-so died, and then your video is about how that person isn't actually dead, that's kind of clickbait because, you're misled viewers. If your belief is what you're saying in the thumbnail or the title of the video, I don't think that's clickbait. You can make that interesting and captivating. To me, the line is when you start misrepresenting stuff. And especially when even if you believe what you're saying, when you start to get into more sensationalist stuff, like this will surely be the end of this thing. One thing I've always tried to do is qualify statements as to what's an opinion and what's a fact. You can say you have an opinion about whether it be China's economy. You could say, it's my opinion. They're in a really tough situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you do that, though, you have to recognize your own, and this is important, like your own qualifications for making that claim, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of people who probably shouldn't be making that claim because they don't have the qualifications to back it up or the research to back it up. So just being cognizant of where your expertise is and what's an opinion versus fact. I think if you navigate that all fine, I think it's important to talk about these things, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the channel name, right? I usually opt to be more boring than than anything else.
Yeah, and I do think that the people who watch you regularly, I scroll through your comments from time to time. They love that about you. So I think it's part of your channel now.